I think I'll turn to Sir Martin Gilbert now. Martin.
As the military action began, as you said, no UN lead of any sort had been agreed. How did this affect, at that moment, the division of responsibility between DFID and the military? How did it impact on what you saw as your respective contributions, what you could deliver at that time?
As I've said, we can do humanitarian anytime without legal authority because you should always help people in need. So even if there was a crime of aggression, you can still go in and help people. So no problem about that, and all the preparations were made for that, and we'd spent money early to get the UN system and the ICRC ready, and we spent more money, as it went. That was all absolutely fine. Then for the aftermath and reconstruction, there are these very serious legal questions about Geneva Convention obligations and the Attorney General was involved in this, giving legal advice because there was pressure to put British people into ORHA, and the Attorney General saying they've got to have legal advice about what they can and can't do. They can do humanitarian, they can't do reconstruction if it means reorganising the institutions of Iraq. So that was a fair old mess. And arguing we've got to get the UN resolution. And of course, Blair had said to me he'd got Bush's promise of a UN lead for reconstruction. Then Bush came to Hillsborough, if you remember, Northern Ireland, and Sally Morgan rang me up and said, he said, UN 6 times in his summing up. So they got him to say vital role for the UN, but it wasn't, people say you shouldn't expect America to let the UN, but America let the UN lead the political process in Afghanistan. It was the same administration with the same views of the UN, but the lead on constructing a new political system in Afghanistan was led out of the UN by Lakhdar Brahimi. So it wasn't ridiculous to think we might be able to persuade Bush to do the same. In fact, I took a copy of the Afghan UN resolution to the cabinet to say, look, we could do it again. This is all we're asking. But in the end, instead, we got 1483, which really fudged and said, I spoke to Kofi around this time. He said, we're not going to do a blue wash for this attack and occupation. So the UN wanted to be engaged, but was not going to bless it. Then in the end, we got 1483, which said there'll be an interim authority, and it had to be brought into being by the occupying powers. It just recognised us as occupying powers. It didn't say it was a legitimate occupation. It just said that's what we were. And other countries wouldn't come in because that was too weak about how you were going to get to a legitimate Iraqi government. And indeed, then I left the government. It was no good. What Blair had promised me wasn't true. He'd just conned me. And we couldn't do it right. It wasn't strong enough to bring in all the other players, although it did explicitly allow the World Bank and so on in. And there was later another UN resolution to recognise the beginning of some Iraqi government authority. And of course, Ayatollah Sistani insisting on elections, or there was going to be even more trouble because the US planned to draw up a constitution and take longer before they had any democratic process for Iraq.
Can I just go back briefly to that short period when you were at DFID and ORHA had been established? First of all, did the establishment of ORHA lower your expectations at that time that there would be a UN route? Was this something which impeded DFID's?
No, we were just in a bit of a lunatic asylum, but we were still doing the best we could, and I believed what the Prime Minister had said to me. So I worked fantastically hard at the World Bank Spring meeting, to really using all my friendships and so on to get everyone to agree that we'd all come together. And so ORHA was just another bit of the problem, but it went from Washington to Kuwait, and then it moved into Baghdad quite quickly. And then they'd set up this ad hoc ministerial committee that Jack Straw chaired to plan the aftermath. And we were getting pressure. Actually, I had pressure from Tim Cross to agree to a particular individual to do humanitarian in ORHA. And we thought he'd performed very badly in Kosovo. And we were saying, look, we need to have someone we trust to do that. But we sent out a mission, Mohsen Malik is a very good official, to have a look at Orha and see what we could do. And he came back and said, it's disastrous, it's chaotic, it doesn't know what it's doing. So we decided to put a small liaison humanitarian unit in and to operate outside. Because in the meantime, we're getting reports that the water's broken off here, these hospitals being looted. You can't wait when you've got those kind of problems. And then there was, I think Jack Straw went on a visit. I'm still in the government at this stage. There's a decision to send 100 officials into Orha. Well, we know about post-crises. Everyone in the world flies in and you get chaos. Bit of that in Haiti. It's the disaster. So imagine you've got this totally dysfunctional Orha and you're going to put another 100 Brits in from all different departments. They could be the best people in the world, but it's just going to be more mess.
So the perception that DFID was reluctant and Downing Street's perception that somehow you were holding back was simply a misunderstanding of the situation?
No, we thought it was, Orha was a mess and putting lots and lots more people in would be dreadful. We put our liaison unit in so that we knew what it was doing or if it was doing anything. We also had the Attorney General's legal advice about what people who went in could do, and that's all over the files, and he wrote a number of letters as well. I mean, it wasn't just a one-off thing. And then the Prime Minister said, Tony Blair then, still the Prime Minister, said, we've got to put in, I think 100 people was the aim, and DFID should pay for them. Drawing down on the money, but which by now the Treasury had said we could have 60 million, up to 60 million. You have to justify each tranche, but we could claim that extra money. And we didn't want to take, neither did the Permanent Secretary, it wasn't just me, reporting responsibility for what we thought would be chaos and hopeless. So we agreed the Foreign Office could draw down on that money and pay for those people, and we'd carry on keeping the humanitarian stuff going.
One last question on this. Given the...
And we were reporting that it was chaos. I mean, and
right.
Others have, you know,
right.
it
Shambles,
was absolutely hopeless, right,
yeah. Given the dominance of Orha and of the American role at this stage in the reconstruction, was there any alternative for DFID? Was there any other route that you contemplated using to get your staff in and to work particularly in the south? Well,
we're day in, day out. I mean, again, if you look at the file, every day to the War Cabinet, I'm saying there's a breakdown of electricity in Basra, ICRC are doing this, there's a little outbreak of cholera there, we're doing that. So we were busy, and feeding in people and money and reports and so on. And we asked Admiral Boyce to get Franks to put some protection on the ICRC medical stocks, which were in danger of being looted, and all the hospitals. So we were very busy, day in, day out, dealing with the immediate mess. And of course the looting, which people have talked as though there wasn't looting in Basra, there was. It went crazy too. So and there we are, trying to keep people fed and food on the sea. And then beyond that, there was the World Bank, and we were close with the World Bank and knew them well and knew their effectiveness. They were sending a scoping mission. This is reconstruction now. And we worked with them and knew how all of that worked. And we weren't ignoring Orha. We weren't writing it off. Some machinery had to be brought into being. But you can't work in it when it's dysfunctional and there are immediate emergencies you've got to attend to. But we kept our eyes open for, and of course it did change.
And you were satisfied that given the resources you had and given the shambles of Orha, you were able to do the maximum in terms of the things you've been describing,
well, we did the humanitarian and we got the rollover of the oil for food so people could still be fed. And, you know, ICRC did a lot of reconnecting electricity and water bladders in Basra as well as Baghdad. They did a magnificent job. So we were doing all of that. And looting, it was getting worse. The chaos was growing. And then I left.